Thank you everyone for being here today. It's interesting to say you're excited about a topic that is not, the happiest of topics, but it's a great topic to discuss. And we have an incredible panel and moderator. So thank you all for being here. I'm just so honored to be always, able to open these things and to give you all our Mptf update. You've heard from me before. You know that this is our 100th year for Mptf, which is quite an accomplishment to be a part of an organization with such longevity. And it just goes to show that the safety net of services that Mptf provides is not only still needed, but it's growing. I think you all understand that with everything that we have dealt with in the past couple of years, from the pandemic to the evolution of business, to social justice issues, politics. I mean, you name it, it's a laundry list. And the world is changing rapidly. And thankfully, Mptf has the most incredible staff. You're going to hear, from Renee Gates today, a licensed clinical social worker, who is really incredible. I just wanted to bring up, mentioned a couple of these items before, but you're all purpose-driven, action-oriented people. So why not give you all a little bit of homework and calls to action to think about? What I wanted to share is that we have we need the support. The 100th anniversary is a reason for us to raise awareness and funding, and that's what we're doing. Part of our fundraising campaign is to rebuild necessary parts of this Wasserman campus that I'm on today, which will really bridge that co-generational mission that we believe in so much. As I go out into the community more, while this campus is an essential part of our mission, so many people don't know what else Mptf does. You all do. If I could ask you to please continue to be our advocates and just share the work that is done in the community, from financial services to insurance to navigating your own healthcare or an aging parent, a referral, which can be an incredible service. You talk to a human being. So I would ask you all to do that. Also, something fun, we are putting together an auction to celebrate 100 years of Hollywood. It will be virtual, and it's put on by Heritage Auctions, which are really an incredible company and partner of ours. So bid on some items or share that with people. That's an easy way to help and maybe take home a little piece of Hollywood history. Then the last thing that I wanted to say is that, another way for us to get the word out and to raise awareness is when people host small gatherings for us, whether it's, a in-person dinner for 12 people that you're close with, or, still a virtual gathering because that is the world that we live in, or it's a gathering where everyone has to be vaccinated, whatever the new parameters are. The more that they can hear from you about who we are, promise you it helps. And it really helps us to be able to serve the people that we need to serve and need our help. And also, again, to raise awareness. So thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to throw it to Kathy Davis, a colleague and friend of mine who works on our Small But Mighty development team and who you all know is the superstar of this PAN group. So take it away.
Thank you, Courtney. I don't know about superstar, but I appreciate it. I just want to say hi to everyone, and it's great to see you, or I guess the opposite, to be seen. As Courtney said, we do have a great program today. It's a serious subject, but it has to be talked about, especially now. And I was hoping that by now we would be in person at the Beverly Wilshire, but it looks like we will have to just wait a little bit longer. And I also want to mention that as we gear up for 2022, if you have any ideas about what you would like to have as a PAN presentation, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email. Most of you have my email address, or you'll be able to find it. Anyway, I just want to say hi and now bye. And I'm going to throw it over to Chung Che. He's our co-chair of PAN.
Thank you, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here today. I hope that everyone is well and that we'll be able to greet one another in person soon. My name is Chung Che. As Kathy said, I'm a co-chair of the Motion Picture Television Fund's Professional Advisory Network. Please note that our presentation today qualifies for CPE credit, and Kathy will send you the certificates by Friday afternoon. Our fourth quarter PAN presentation is scheduled for November 11th. So please mark that on your calendar. Kathy will send you the information on the topic and speakers by the end of September. Today's topic of elder abuse is sad, painful, and heartbreaking on so many levels. It's a problem that robs many older people of their dignity, security, and wealth. Based on numerous studies tracking elder abuse, somewhere between 10 to 20% of people 60 years and older are subjected to abuse by family, friends, trusted companions, caretakers, and advisors. And many of these cases go unreported. Our distinguished panel in today's presentation will discuss the types of elder abuse, reporting requirements, and best practices for advisors and others concerned about this problem. Here are a few facts from the World Health Organization and the National Council on Aging to consider. Elder abuse is predicted to increase as many countries are experiencing rapidly aging populations. The global population of people 60 years and older will double from 962 million in 2017 to about 2 billion in 2050. The annual loss by victims of financial abuse is estimated to be at least $36.5 billion. That definitely gives us all something to think about. And now I would like to turn over our program to the moderator, Suzanne Cohen, a trust, estate, and financial abuse attorney with Hahn Hahn. Thank you, Suzanne, for taking time to moderate this important panel discussion.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here. This is a really wonderful group, this panel. We have had a lot of fun preparing. And I would say that I would add, we know as professionals that we're in the midst of an aging tsunami that involves the baby boomers, getting 60 and older. And we're right in the middle of that. And we live in the most populous state in the country. And we live in the most populous county in the country, and we live and work in the most populous county in the country. The projections from the last census, and the results are going to come out in September, but the projections from last census was that 19 to 20% of Californians were going to be over age 60 as of the early 2020s. And so we know this in our practices. We know that we're getting an increasing number of calls related to things to do with aging, abuse issues, preventing abuse, avoiding abuse, and when I think about the aging demographic, I think also of not just the people who are turning 60 and 65, but we're also looking at a larger population in terms of frail elders. I want to add also that in California, we've got our elder and dependent adult abuse statute. And that covers people who are 65 and older, considered elders, and people who are under 65, who are considered dependent adults, and that affords those elder protections to people who have some functional issues in terms of how they're able to function in the world and the kind of support that they need. So I would add that a lot of what we're talking about is going to apply to dependent adults as well. And I want to say in a really, really positive note that having also practiced in Arizona, our law is absolutely wonderful here in California when it comes to protecting elders and dependent adults. With that, I want to, and the level of professionals in this field is wonderful, as you all know, because you're all part of it. So with that, I want to take us into our first arena and have Renee talk about really what abuse encompasses, how broad it is, and the various forms that we might be witnessing. Renee, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, and everybody that has shared already. The statistics that you heard are real, and it's only going to get worse. And we know that as social workers on the front lines with our seniors. I have had the honor of being a geriatric social worker at the Motion Picture and Television Fund for 17 years and have seen a great deal of abuse of various kinds that we we really need to own and work with. And I'd like to take a moment to reflect on the plight of our seniors during COVID-19, because this has been a very special time. And the American Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry had a quote that I found profound. It says, "Are elderly in a cage, under lockdown, within a lockdown?" And in fact, that's what our seniors have been living in COVID-19. Whether they're in a long-term care facility and stuck in their room, unable to see their families unless they have a window, to seniors that couldn't get together to play bingo or whatever it is that they enjoy that improves their quality of life. So I was thinking about, so what is elder abuse? And we're going to go through a few different aspects of it. There's two components that have to be present for elder abuse. One is an older person that has suffered any kind of harm, deprivation, unnecessary danger, undue influence, and we'll go down the list of all the various types of harm. But there also has to be a person in a relationship of trust for causing, that is responsible for causing, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do my slides. That person is responsible for causing or failing to prevent the abuse. So that's what elder abuse is, and what categories are identified in terms of elder abuse. Slide 4 starts with passive neglect. What is that? That's a caregiver's failure to provide life's necessities, whether it's food, medication, hygiene, laundry. The second identified is willful deprivation, and that's keeping from denying an elderly person their medication, their medical tools they need to get around, medical devices, and even keeping them from going to medical appointments. The third item in the list from the National Council of Aging is financial exploitation. And that's a big subject, which will be addressed at length during this. And so we also have physical abuse, we have sexual abuse, emotional and psychological abuse, confinement, and abandonment. And all of these things are happening to our seniors by someone that's failing to or creating the harm. The extent of elder abuse, elder mistreatment in the United States, it is tragic to report that up to 2 out of 10 older adults are victims of abuse in the United States, with the estimate that 24 cases go unreported for every 1 case that is reported. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of seniors that are in very difficult situations. Something I found interesting, the United Nations reports that globally, as we have to begin to think not just about us, but globally, 1 in 6 elderly experience some form of abuse, according to the United Nations. So now we get to how do we combat the rise in elder abuse cases? That's what this workshop is about. And we need to educate ourselves and have awareness about the risk factors as well as the protective factors. And many of the risk factors are perpetuated by caregivers. The first one and the first two most prominent are social isolation and dementia. And with dementia, physical abuse is the highest rated type of abuse. And with people that have dementia, they don't have a way to get help with this. I like to remind people that we are the voice of the voiceless. These people need someone to speak on their behalf. These people in the risk that have the high risk factors. Living arrangements, living with people that don't take care of them. Intra-individual characteristics of abusers really means what's their personality like? Are they abusive? There's a category of adult children who were abused as children that are now having to care for their aging parent. And that's a reality. Issues of mental illness, on the caregiver's part, hostility. There's certainly absent alcohol and substance abuse and abuser dependency. Protective factors, strong social relationships. We must make sure that our seniors have connections to family, friends, neighbors, informal support network, and formal support network. That social coordination among community agencies exists, and that's about us, Mptf, working with Adult Protective Services or any social service organization, working as a team to try to help our seniors. Community cohesion and a sense of collective identity. And this gets back to what our social experience is. And finally, we have to look at it is a higher level of community functionality and greater collective efficacy. What can the entire system do to be efficient in this process? The one thing I want to say at this point is part of what hinders it is the absence of technology because many seniors, and yes, it starts at 60, but it goes to 110 or 12, have no access to technology.
What we'd like to do next is we'd like to go to Alex, who's a financial advisor, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about what he's seeing in terms of financial abuse.
As a business manager, you're in a position where you're dealing intimately with the finances of individuals, and in many instances with individuals who are elderly and who whose judgment might be compromised, or who may be sort of prone to some of what's been discussed in terms of folks in their ecosystem sort of looking for opportunities to take advantage of them financially. And instances that we've seen within our office, it could come from people's children. In many cases, it comes from service providers or folks that the victim, the elderly person, may have a financial relationship with, and that person sort of sees an opportunity to take advantage, and then and our clients are very fortunate because they have us as a gatekeeper to help identify these situations and to help sort of play defense against these situations. So many are not as fortunate as to have a conduit to protect them. but, you know, situations we've seen are, you know, somewhat recently, a client who had an elderly client who had a long time masseuse who was providing services to them on a regular basis. You know, we get an email out of the blue from the client which says, I'm going to be making a gift to this person. Their family, you know, they're experiencing a financial hardship within their family, and they need money to take care of this problem. And, you know, this wouldn't be somebody who would regularly be the recipient of anything more than what they were entitled to via their services. You hope that in these situations you have family members or you have other trusted people within the circle to go to them and say, hey, we received this email. We know that we suspect that this was the product of undue influence, and let's figure out whether we need to remove this person from the situation. You know, certainly let's make sure that that they're not going to be in a position to take advantage in a situation where we might not be able to diagnose it. You know, if it's a question of somebody asking for a check to be written or a wire to be initiated, that's one thing. But you know, you never know what might be going on behind closed doors at somebody's house. You know, if a person could, you know, whether there's enough physical security in place so that a person wouldn't be able to steal anything physically from their house, or, you know, whether if there's situations where there's accounts that we may not be involved with, or, you know, whether there might be other channels through which a person might be trying to take advantage of someone financially. Obviously, it gets a lot harder when you're dealing with direct family members who might be taking advantage. You know, when it's third parties, you know, there's in many instances a family member in place, or in many instances we feel emboldened enough to say to them, like, hey, you know, we're going to need to investigate this further. You know, we can't just initiate a transaction based on, you know, a single request where you might have been in the room and able to manipulate an email or put pressure on somebody. When it's somebody's children, you get into a really way more difficult situation where it can be harder to understand somebody's intentions. And that's where, you know, you hope to have a team around the person where there's hopefully a trusted in the state lawyer, you know, trusted, you know, we're typically not somebody who's directly involved with making investments for clients. So maybe there's an investment advisor involved, and maybe there's a whole team of people that can kind of have somewhat of an intervention to say, you know, we have estate planning documents from when the client was more lucid that, you know, describe a very different intention in terms of how they want to, transfer wealth and transfer assets. And now we're having deviations from that. Is that intended? Is that the product of undue influence? You know, is this really what is intended, should there be? Are we in a position where we should be getting involved and putting a stop to it?
So Alex, the way that you're seeing this presented in your practice is you might be seeing a longtime client that you know may be declining in capacity, and you start to see some requests that look erratic and suspicious. And so what's your first line of recourse in terms of what you do when you're seeing that with the client?
Well, you know, I think you sort of touched on it. You know, hopefully you're getting ahead of it, and hopefully hopefully the advisors and or the members of the family or trusted friends are sort of identifying that there's a sort of decline in lucidity and cognizance and any of the sort of physical or mental traits that would indicate that a person decision-making capacity may be compromised. And hopefully before the unusual or erratic requests start coming in, you have an opportunity to potentially put some internal controls in place, right? And say, okay, now we think that so-and-so is at a point where if there's going to be expenditures in excess of a certain dollar threshold, you know, we should have a conversation with multiple people about it. Or, you know, if you know, especially if the children are if the children are trustworthy and the estate plan is for everything to go to the children anyway, so, you know, you're not as concerned about the children becoming a problem in the dynamic, even though those things can evolve quickly.
The children are always a problem. I'm sorry.
Now.
No,
There's the good ones and the bad ones.
Sure. Let's focus on our interactions with the good ones, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you have the good children involved. They're concerned because mom or dad has people in their life around them who may be, you know, who may be looking to take advantage of a situation, who may know a little bit too much about, you know, the fact that that person has wealth or resources, and hopefully you can sort of design some internal controls that will allow for, you know, to sort of prevent anything from happening too quickly, right? And just to make sure that any kind of that decision making is very deliberate and collaborative, and doesn't leave them prone to somebody trying to get in and out and take advantage.
So one of the ways that we handle that, and Stu, you can perhaps talk to this I mean, you certainly can talk to this as well, is when we start to see a client perhaps declining in capacity, getting frail in some way, maybe has a health issue, going to go into the hospital for something that's emergent, even if they're a younger client, and there's no question about their capacity, is we ask the client who their trusted advisors are, and we ask them to sign waivers so that we can speak with those folks. If something should happen when they're in the hospital, we need to make sure that we can speak with their successor trustee, their agent, their accountant, that sort of thing. Stu, is that the kind of thing that you do as well when you start to see things heading in a direction where the client might be vulnerable?
Actually, we try to do it before then. Frequently, we're in our firm, we're a big fan of the team approach. We want the Alexes and the Renees involved in the process moving forward. So it is not at all uncommon in our firm that at the very get-go, we will talk with the clients about having them sign what we call disclosure authorizations, which separate form, it's not part of our retainer agreement. We talk with them about it separately. Who do you want us to be able to communicate with? And in our document, it's a staged progress. We can discuss anything at any time. We can't discuss anything unless we've been notified that there's a medical issue. I mean, it's a question of check boxes. We try to get that early on if it seems appropriate, but down the road, it may come later when somebody begins to get frail. Now, I'm thinking of two specific, we're talking about the good kids and the bad kids. The yin and the yang of this whole world. Paul Greenwood, who was the head of the elder abuse unit in San Diego for decades, a stellar lawyer, a prosecutor, would talk about what the statistics looked like on weekends. There was an absolute spike Friday night and Saturday night in physical elder abuse in San Diego County, perpetrated by adult children living at home who were separated or divorced, who were drug or alcohol dependent. They would be attacking their parents when the parents wouldn't give them money. They were attacking their parents for no reason at all. The bad kid. The good kid, you're talking about the very subtle aspects. You know, we talk about incapacity and seeing the signs, but undue influence is so much more subtle. A real quick war story. I had a client, I had represented the family for probably 25 years. I get a call from the daughter saying, Dad wants to talk to you, but he's embarrassed. He doesn't want to call you. So I said, no, I'll come over. We'll visit. Dad was in his 80s at this point. What's going on? She says, he's got a financial problem. So I go over to the house and I'm sitting with Dad on the couch. We're close to each other back when you could be close to people. I remember those days. And I said, so what's going on? He says, I got taken. I said, tell me about it. He says, my financial planner with the XYZ investment firm retired. They assigned me a new financial planner, and I'm not quoting him. She was just this sweet young thing. And she came in and she started going over my portfolio, and she said, you know, you really need to move some of these investments around. Long story short, she got him at age 85 to liquidate his 6-figure IRA all in one swell swoop, buy a deferred annuity that would begin paying out when he was 110 years old. And I'm saying,
What a
how
sweet
did
young
she-
thing.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I said. So we talked about, you know, I immediately said, you got to call, we got to unwind this thing. We were able to unwind the annuity, get the money back. And I tried desperately to convince the financial institution to repay him all the taxes that he had paid on this, that we were going to, you know, go to court, et cetera. I wanted this woman to lose her license. I said to the client, we really need to sue. We really need to go to Adult Protective Services. And he turned to me and he put his hand on my knee and he said, Stu, you and I have known each other a long time. I'm an old man. You know I got taken. My kids know I got taken. The rest of the world doesn't need to know that I got taken. I'll eat the taxes. And I think that was an intelligent, totally holistic approach. But for the kids caring about their dad, back to the good kids, bad kids, you know, I would never, he would have just sat on this and he would have just eaten himself up alive about it. So,
But you also had the relationship with him.
exactly.
You had a willing client. So we have good kids, bad kids. We have willing clients who want our help, and we have clients who don't want our help. And where Alex was going was this team approach, which Stu, you're talking about as well. And I want to just go back to Alex for a minute and then head over to Kaarel and say, Alex, what do you do when you have a client that doesn't want to take the team approach and let other people get involved and start to help? What do you do when you start seeing these things, when it's a sweet young thing, and your client says, get off my case?
It's really challenging. It's really challenging. You know, I think, you know, it sort of where my job ends and where some of your all responsibilities begin is when a person doesn't want to help themselves and they need to be referred to, you know, an agency or, you know, or somebody who can come in and kind of, you know, forcefully try to protect them from themselves. You know, I mean, you know, I think, you know, getting some, you know, like conservatorships and stuff like that, you know, that's getting to an extreme place. But, you know, and again, that's sort of where our role would end. But, you know, I think identifying those things and at least notifying any relevant parties in writing, like, hey, we couldn't get to a point of understanding on this, and this person can't help themselves. In that instance, we may need to resign, or we may need to limit the scope of what we're doing so that we're not a party to it, and you know, and then, you know, but making sure that everyone's on notice, like, this is going on, and, you know, you guys need to speak to the appropriate professionals to stop the bleeding here.
So if you have as part of a client's portfolio, you know, funds with an investment institution, a bank, you can't actually make that report, right, as a financial advisor, but a financial institution can. So is that the kind of thing where you can let the banker know that you're seeing things that you want them to have a look at? And that will actually, I think, once you speak to that, that'll take us nicely over to Kaarel, who does fraud investigations on behalf of City National when they start to see transactions that aren't looking right.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, a lot of times, you know, I can't proclaim to be an expert on elder abuse law, but I do know that the different people, you know, going back to having a team and having an ecosystem, you know, different people have different abilities to protect the client. And, you know, communication is key to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on, you know, at least what's suspected to be going on, and everybody can kind of think about what resources they have to bring to the table to, you know, to hopefully, you know, protect someone from themselves.
So what, you know, one of the things that we talked about when we were preparing was some of us here in this group are mandated reporters and some of us are not. And Stu and I are attorneys, and in California, we are not mandated reporters of elder financial abuse. And if we can't get our client, you know, engaged and allow us to help them, then the fact of their incapacity is an attorney-client confidential secret, and we can't share it. And so what do? Well, we frankly might find ways to engage mandated reporters. Like I'm often, because financial abuse and neglect and physical abuse and isolation, which leads to undue influence, they go hand in hand. I'm often trying to see if I can bring in a care manager, a geriatric care manager like Renee. I'm often want to be in touch with the banker, because there might be something that I can't do. I can talk with Renee, I can talk with Kaarel, and I can say, your client might need help with this, or, you know, Renee, can you get into the house? The client is willing to have you in there and evaluate care and see what's going on. And then at some point I might have to say, client has fired me, I'm going to have to step away, but at least I know that I've handed it off to people that are watching and that have a mandated reporter duty. And so with that, I'd like to go over to Kaarel and talk about what happens on the banking side, on the financial institutions side. The law in California changed a few years back and added financial institutions to the mandated reporter list, the mandated reporter on elder financial abuse. It's already included social workers, clergy people, healthcare people, as people who might be there on the front lines spotting the elder abuse, and they can then make a report to Adult Protective Services. And Adult Protective Services can engage law enforcement and the county, who might be able to get a conservatorship going through the public guardian, or enlist help for somebody else to start a conservatorship. But once the banks and the financial institutions started to become mandated reporters, that was really a good thing from my perspective. And I've seen many caring bankers help clients. And so, Kaarel, talk a little bit about what you do and how you help protect clients.
Thank you, Suzanne. And it's a privilege to represent City National Bank. As you mentioned, we do investigate elder financial abuse. And as you can imagine, being a bank and having branches, we get a lot of clients who come into the branch and exhibit various types of possible abuse, specifically elder financial abuse. We may have the person accompanied by a brand new girlfriend or boyfriend who's 40 years younger than they, and they want to give their money to them. We may have the overeager helper who wants to be added to their account because they want to help this person because this person is getting older and they want to be added to their account. The client may or may not know what's going on. And so we as a bankers then have to make decisions as to exactly what is going on. We may have clients who are being taken by fraud schemes. I had a situation, we had an elderly client who was convinced to invest in a financial instrument called a binary option. And I have a master's in finance. I had no clue what that is. I had to go on the internet, find out that this is an exotic financial instrument that was only should be used by specialized experts. And here was an 80-year-old lady who was being convinced to take a third of her money with us and put it into this type of scheme. So we have clients who are being defrauded in that way. We have other clients who sometimes kind of know what's going on or maybe suspect that it's not right. And as a result, maybe not completely truthful with the bank as to what they're doing. Often the fraudsters coach the clients. They tell the clients, bankers are not your friends. They're going to tell you not to do this transaction. So go ahead and tell them so and so. We had an elderly client who was convinced to open up an account. She drove 80 miles to one of our branches, opened up an account, and opened up a construction company and told us that she has been in the construction business for 40 years. Turns out she was receiving funds from a small college, $1 million worth, all fraud funds, and she was supposed to then disperse them to a third party. She had no idea that this was going on. But she was coached by the fraudster to say those type of things to the bank. So as bankers, specifically as branch employees, these type of people come into our branch. Sometimes it's very covert, very obvious. Sometimes it's not quite that obvious. And so the bankers are trained, our tellers are trained to look out for this stuff. But what do we do if we notice it, especially if it's accompanied by somebody with them? And one of the things we try to do is we try to separate them physically at the branch. In other words, if there's a young lady or a young man that's now all of a sudden this friend of this person's, we try to separate them, take our client into a conference room and try to talk to them and find out exactly what is going on. Is this their request? Do they really want to do this? And often we have, as you can imagine, we have wealthy clients who are elderly and they're alone. They don't have any family members. Often they're estranged from the family members that they do have. So they don't want even their family members to, do that. They don't want them to know. And so we almost by de facto become one of their family members. And that's a line that we have to be very careful. We don't want to get so involved in their personal affairs that we get accused of advising them to do one thing or another. But we do certainly want to find out the facts. And we want to find out exactly what it is that they're wanting to do. And are they doing it of their own free will? And are they doing it without the undue influence that was mentioned? Often our clients are very well at what they're doing. In fact, many will tell us that they can spot a fraudster. They know exactly what fraud is. And what we're finding is sometimes they don't believe us when they tell us, when we tell them that this person that they thought was their fiance. I had a case where an elderly person was paying a fiance for over 2 years. And I was so sure that they were going to get married on Christmas Day and was devastated when I told them that this person is never going to come back, that they had all kinds of excuses. They were a veteran in Afghanistan, so on and so forth. And they were so sure. So oftentimes it's an issue of loneliness. They have nobody. Somebody all of a sudden shows an interest in them and it goes on great for a while. And then all of a sudden the money requests come. I need a ticket to come and visit you, or I have to pay taxes. I had a case where this man sent pictures. He said of himself with roses and cards. Of course, you can get pictures on the internet at any time. Mm-hmm. And so it's a banker's responsibility, and our job is to try to ferret through, what's legitimate, what's not. And ultimately, as you know, as a banker, a client has a right to do what they want with their money, especially if they're coherent, if they know what they're doing. And ultimately, if they insist, and the question was asked, well, what's the final option? And as a banker, we don't do it very often. I call it the nuclear option. Is once in a while, we may have to close our client's account and tell them, you're an expert in your field, whatever it was, whether it's an attorney or a doctor, and all of those professions get targeted. We're bankers. We see this fraud. We work with it all the time. And there's once in a while, we have to tell them, we're so sure that what you're doing is fraudulent, but you have a right to do what you want. We will not be a part of it though. And once in a while, we have to close the account. Now, as was mentioned, we are mandated reporters. So once we ferret through all of those facts and all of those stories, we then will file a report with Adult Protective Services in the county that they live in. California has multiple counties. Each of them has a different methodology for reporting. Some are online, some you have to do by phone. But ultimately, if we determine that there is suspected elder abuse, financial abuse specifically, we will report that to them, and we serve as a resource to them. At City National, we get reports from all the branches, and we then get centralized to us, and then we will do an investigation so that we're not just filing reports willy-nilly, but filing reports that have substance to them and reports that will truly assist the client. And it's unfortunate that it is so, as Renee mentioned, it is so prevalent. We visited an elderly client, a doctor, and we visited his apartment, and we don't normally do that, but once in a while, if we feel it necessary, we do that. Then the abuser, who was a young lady who was writing fraudulent checks from his account, was there living with him. And he begged us not to report her because she cooked soup so well and she was his only companion. He had nobody else in this world. And if we took her away, he would have nobody. And so there are truly tragic cases that we encounter, but as bankers and specifically as City National Bank, we truly are looking out for our clients and trying to do the best for them in spite of themselves, even if they don't realize that they're being defrauded. And so many of them don't realize it.
So
They
Kaarel,
just don't know.
you actually are raising a really important point, which is when you look at so many things are happening these days with caregivers overreaching, and it can start as, hey, I need to buy some shoes for my kid who's going back to school, to I need to bring a family member over from another country, et cetera, et cetera. I want to buy a house here. And this element of isolation that Renee talked about before, and this idea of I am the only person that will help you. You are dependent on me. That's where we get into that loop. And so people who have one of the things that's, I think, great about the older generation of folks is they often have longstanding relationships with their bankers, and their bankers and their tellers know them. What can you do about, so if somebody comes in the bank and you're seeing that, then there's a whole protective loop that goes into play. There's only so much you can do, but you are a mandated reporter, and then you can make that handoff in a really sophisticated way to law enforcement in that county. What about online scams? What are you able to do about that? And this might actually segue back to Alex, and then I want to get to Stu, but segue back to Alex in that Alex as a financial advisor is going to be keeping track of the client's accounts and seeing what's going on. So he might see online scams. Where is that really something that as bankers that you're able to keep an eye on? Or
Yes. Part of what we do is when we get a report or we suspect, for example, a caregiver or a family member, we don't just take that and go with that. We will look at the activity in their account. Is the activity, does it indicate some type of a fraud, whether it's online? And sometimes people, I'm included, may know just enough about online banking to be dangerous. And so we will look at the activity in the account. And that kind of segues into another point is, as a banker, we are a mandated reporter, but we're not a mouthpiece for family members. In other words, we've had family members come to us and say, please report so-and-so for abuse. Well, what evidence do you have? Well, we don't have any. We just think that he's being taken. Well, we'll look at the records. We'll look at our bank records. Is there anything in the transactions that indicates that there's abuse going on? And if there isn't, then we won't report it, and we'll justify it because we can only report on what we see. And as you all know, family dynamics as they are, you can have siblings against each other. And we've had situations where we've had one sibling trying to get back at another one and basically say, report so-and-so to Adult Protective Services. Yep. And what we respond is say, you know what? You're in the best position. You live with them. If you see this going on, you have an obligation to report it. We'll report the financial piece of it if there is some. But if there isn't any, I will not become a mouthpiece for Susie Q, who wants to get back at Johnny Q because they've had a problem all these years.
But Kaarel, if there's an ongoing transaction that's happening online, you know, that where there's suddenly now somebody has an account number and they're taking out a regular amount each month, that's not going to necessarily come to the banker's attention unless somebody makes a complaint. Am I right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Debit card,
So I think here's where, you know, Alex, the fact that, you know, financial advisors, you are regularly, right? You're on the hot seat when it comes to your clients' finances in terms of are there gains and losses and what's happening and is it diversified? So you would be the one that would be likely to see something that doesn't come into the bank as a report. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of twofold, right? For those clients that we're responsible for, you know, for all of their bill paying, then, you know, typically something's going through our, our typical process where, an invoice comes in or a request comes in, and then, we have in most instances a client approval process, and, and we might flag something on the front end. And in other situations where we may just be doing accounting and tax work for people, and we, we're not paying bills, so we're just getting sort of bank statements after the facts. You kind of look at stuff and you go back and you're sort of characterizing things. You're trying to code and identify items within a general ledger, and you see something that's unusual, and you might ask the question, hey, what's this? And, and if it sounds suspicious, then potentially think about, going to the next layer if the client has an answer for it, but it just seems out of character or potentially abusive.
So this is also really, helpful for me when I'm thinking about some of my clients that are getting, that are transitioning in capacity, but they might not be ready to resign as trustee of their trust. It's usually these retired lawyers, they do not want to resign as trustee of their trust. These retired business people, they can get taken on these massive scams because the scammers always have a scam that matches their victim, whether it's a sweetheart scam or a sophisticated financial scam. So Alex, what I'm thinking is, I tend to think of financial advisors as people who help people manage their money and know about investments. But I think what's really important for me is also the fact regular bill paying, that person, if they're getting frail, if they're unwell, if they're in and out of the hospital, I should be recommending to them that they start to engage a professional who can help with regular bill paying, because that's where you're going to catch that stuff, maybe on the front end, and be able to report it.
Yeah,
exactly. It's like it's like you sort of have like the an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure, right? It's like if it's possible to get a system in place where there could be a trusted bookkeeper or somebody else involved who's involved in the monthly bill paying cycle for a client, that's probably the most ideal situation. If that's not possible, having an accountant or some professional review bank statements after the fact to at least assess whether there's any sort of nefarious or unusual activity, I think it's still better than nothing. But unfortunately, that's it may be too late in some instances if there's been some money.
And people don't go see their accountants and their lawyers when there's problems. They come after the problem, or sometimes before. And often these folks that are getting into this arena in life, they've stopped filing tax returns, and their accountant wonders where they are, but maybe is able to check on them and maybe isn't. Stu, I would love to talk to you and talk to you about not just what you're seeing, but some of the really helpful laws that we have on the books that come to mind, where you can cancel a transaction with the caregiver if you catch it. How conservatorships, voluntary and otherwise, can play into this. Tell us a little bit about, Stu has written a wonderful chapter on elder abuse that's going to be circulated. So we want to give him a chance to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, a couple of things first. And I think there's an area, picking up on what Alex was saying in terms of bookkeepers and the like. I think private professional fiduciaries, PPFs, are an underutilized resource when it comes to bill paying and bill tracking. You don't need the whole necessarily care management function that an LCSW as a PPF may be able to provide, but a lot of the PPFs do money management, bill paying, and that's a resource. PFAC's is a great place to locate people like that. The other thing that Kaarel mentioned that we were talking about with the online banking, and this may be whether it might be worth looking at. I have at least 2 credit cards where there is obviously an algorithm out there that is tracking my purchases in terms of the kinds of things my wife and I buy, where we buy it. And we've got these travel notifications if we're about to leave the area. And couple of times a quarter, I'll get an email that says, hey, you just spent $433 at XYZ. Did you do this? And it's a click, it's a text or an email, and I click yes or no. But there's obviously this program out there that's tracking this. I'm not sure, I'm saying this with hesitancy, but is that something in terms of the online banking issue, those kinds of algorithms, whether that makes sense to at least be thinking about in terms of tracking outside activity where you're only dealing with online banking? Because everything you were saying, which is great, and everything City National Bank is doing is great, it involves at some point personal contact. And so much of what's going on right now, as Suzanne pointed out, I think is totally online, and we're not seeing the insides of banks, and we're not meeting people person to person. That's just something to throw out there. In terms of what we do, and thank you for the plug for the book, I appreciate that, first of all, when we're talking about watching the finances, that I urge clients to add, as things begin to slide, add your agent under your durable power of attorney for asset management as either a co-signer on some of your bank accounts or as someone who gets a copy of the statement. You don't have to give up control. I mean, this is a whole control issue. And, you know, Suzanne keeps picking on all us lawyers who are getting of a certain age, but I think you're right. So first of all, let someone else get involved. The second thing I've been having a conversation with some of my clients moving forward in their lives is short of conservatorships. Okay, when we did your estate plan for you 30 years ago, you had durable powers of attorney in place that were springing powers. They were only going to come into effect when you were deemed to lack capacity, and I want to talk about that term in a minute, lack capacity to handle your financial affairs. Well, you have told me that you're forgetful, you didn't pay this bill, whatever. Why don't we redo that power of attorney, that durable power of attorney, to make it effective immediately so that whomever you've designated as your agent can be involved in the present tense, and we don't have to worry about challenging you as to whether or not you lack capacity at this point. You've already got that person involved. I'm actually having a certain amount of success in that regards with clients. In terms of the whole issue of capacity, under EDACPA, the Elder Abuse Dependent Civil Protection Act, and under the DIPSITA, the definition of incapacity under the probate code, lack of capacity is a moving target under California law. Probate code sections 810, 811 through 813 define, we don't use the word competency anymore, but we talk about capacity, and we talk about capacity to do certain things. And again, this is a way of supporting the client. You may not have the capacity to do X anymore. I'm not into mountain climbing anymore. You know, I don't have that. I never did, but that's beside the point. But I still have the capacity to manage my finances. I had a wonderful client. It was a court appointment in a conservatorship years ago. I went and met with him, and this guy, he was living on his own. He was a senior, and he showed me around his apartment. He showed me his checkbook. He was taking care of himself. He had absolutely no problems in his day-to-day life. So I'm kind of wondering, why does his son think he needs a conservatorship? And I'm looking through the petition at the allegations that are being made. And I said to the client, I said, you know, your son thinks you need some help. In particular, you've got this $5 million stock portfolio, and he says you're not handling it right. You know, that's kind of significant. And he looked at me a minute. He says, "Oh, is that a lot of money?" Bingo. Okay. Yeah. So what we did there, and this is one of the things I do frequently when we're in the area of slowly, carefully moving into more and more supervision. And we try to avoid conservatorships, but in this case, it was appropriate. We carved out in the conservatorship order that he got an allowance every month that went right into his bank account. He continued to pay his bills. He continued to take care of his day-to-day affairs. He was responsible for keeping his doctor's appointments. The conservator had the right to look at the medical records, make sure he was taking his meds, make sure he was doing this, that, and the other thing, make sure the bills were being paid. But if everything was okay, it was hands off. And this person was.
I want to just add, Stu, this is a beautiful approach that we are using more and more with clients who have caregivers that are overreaching.
Yep.
Whether it's a voluntary conservatorship because we need a conservatorship to pursue litigation and the elder wants us to pursue it, or whether or not it's frankly a trustee resignation, and then that, you know, that sweet young thing or that sweet whatever age thing, because it's things of all ages that are in the residence doing all kinds of things, then we keep the household running, but we put the controls in the hands of somebody who can track it. And I'm seeing more and more that we're able to avoid conservatorships by letting the elder know we can keep your household going, but have somebody else be watching the purse.
Yep.
And then that caregiver might stay, there isn't overreaching, because they realize the game is up, they're going to lose their housing, they're going to lose whatever little, you know, sort of support and income that they have from the elder. So it's like, you know, play ball with the person who's putting boundaries in, or, you know, leave the home and
Or you
we'll
lose,
have
yeah.
a more nuclear option, as Kaarel mentioned.
Yep.
I want to say that we should remember, we think of conservatorships as a last resort. They're expensive, they're time consuming, they are problematic in all kinds of ways, but you can do a voluntary conservatorship. And often I've done those for elderly clients that want somebody to pursue the abuse that happened, but they don't want to do it. They don't want to be the bad guy. So they put that good trustee, the good son, the good daughter, they put them in charge, the professional fiduciary, and we make sure there's an allowance and that the home is maintained. But I just want to put it out there that voluntary conservatorships are underused. California law is absolutely wonderful. There's shortcuts in probate court. So when you're thinking about an elder financial abuse litigation matter, Stu and I don't use the general civil courts where you have a litigation, there's all kinds of discovery. We're going straight into the probate court where the judge is there to use their gavel to protect vulnerable people. And the judges, the probate judges in LA County and a lot of California counties are very, very well informed. They're aware of their duties. They're aware of their immense power.
Mhm.
And you can get in there much more quickly than general civil.
Yep.
Do you
Oh,
want
much
to
more-
just talk for a sec on California remedies, and then let's go to
Yep.
Renee on lessons learned from COVID.
Yeah, the remedies for financial and physical abuse, the ability to get a elder abuse restraining order or domestic violence restraining order. The law is extremely, and I'll be brief because we are running out of time, extremely user-friendly. Actually, I have seen when I've been involved in helping a client get either an elder abuse restraining order or a domestic violence restraining order, that the judges don't really want to see lawyers because it's very much do it yourself. And if you look, when you get the materials, if you look online at the package for either a domestic violence restraining order or an elder abuse restraining order, it is literally forms are walking you through it with instructions on the backside of each form and how to fill it out. And 90%, if you're in this court, 90% of what you're going to see are hand filled out forms. It's people showing up and doing it. It's I'm not sure how it's being handled right now with COVID, but I believe it's one of the few areas where you still go into court, appear personally, and it's basically first come, first serve. The clerks are great at helping you walk it through to the extent they can without practicing law. The biggest problem I see is in terms of, especially with physical abuse and getting a restraining order there has to be a first act. You have to have evidence of the existence of the threat in some palpable, factual way. You can't just say, I'm scared that he's going to do something. You're scared that he's going to do something because he did something already. And until you have that, there's an issue. So with that, I do want to give time to Renee to move forward.
Yeah, so Renee, talk a bit about the lessons that you think that are takeaways from this time.
With COVID-19, what we saw was so much isolation, and community service programs, many of them had to shut down because of COVID. However, Meals on Wheels figured out a way to continue to go get food to the elderly on a daily basis or a couple times a week. Adult day programs and Alzheimer's programs also continued to did a transition to the Zoom format, which helped adult day programs and Alzheimer's associations help the seniors feel somewhat connected. There was a move to create it within faith-based communities, asking the leaders to reach out to their congregants. And if they knew people that were isolated and alone, that they would reach out to them and you know, be a good neighbor. Motion Picture and Television Fund, we continued our online and telephone contact, mostly telephone contact with our clients very regularly during all of this time to make sure that their needs were met and to help them get their basic needs met if they weren't. We also have the daily call sheet program in Motion Picture and volunteers. It's a volunteer program that was expanded to help reduce isolation. And what do we do in the future? What do we do in the future? One is we need to help our individual seniors be prepared. And this is something that I've not been in one house where a senior was prepared for an emergency. And if this network that we're creating around this older adult can help, then let's get emergency preparedness properly in its place. And then there's institutional preparedness, and certainly a well-prepared local, state, and national responses are very important. But go back to the one person sitting in her apartment or his apartment alone with no access and to things. And I want to just reinforce, if you need to report to APS, Google APS report and the county and the state, and you'll get exactly what you need to know, who you need to report to. And the other thing that I want to just end with is every one of you can continue to educate yourself on this topic because it's a huge, broad topic. Hopefully, you'll have some awareness skills that you didn't have before when you're working with your clients, and then take the action, which is to make the report. If you suspect there is elder abuse, please make the report. They would rather you make it and find that it wasn't a problem than not having made it. So please report. And remember, we are the voice for the voiceless. That's the reality.
So one of the wonderful things about working with this panel for me has been is that we're all sharing approaches and information, and we can see where we all fit in this together. We're not in the same room today. Otherwise, it would be really, really fun to be seeing your faces and really have a better opportunity to have a discussion where you can talk about your practices and what you're seeing, and we can all help each other and connect and really be that community network that helps us thrive, that helps people thrive when they are vulnerable. I just want to say, if anybody, we're a little short on time, but if anybody has a question, since we're at time, does anybody have anything else that they want to say or share?
You know, if not, I have a few closing remarks, if that's okay.
Yes, and I would just say that as a follow-up, we're going to send out Stu's chapter. Is that right, Stu?
Yeah, I'm going to be, I realized, I was telling Kathy via email, the copy I sent over yesterday somehow got corrupted. So I'm going to resend it tonight. So it'll be available for send out tomorrow.
And then I will have a PowerPoint that's really bare bones. It's just all like a toolbox for the law that I will get to Kathy to send out. And then Renee, are we going to share your PowerPoint as well?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
That's
Great.
excellent PowerPoint, Renee. Fine job.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Back to you, Kathy.
Okay, thank you. I just want to reiterate what Courteney said about being an advocate for MPTF. You can always be an advocate for us and our work in the community, considering you can consider hosting a small in-person or virtual event to raise awareness and possibly funding for MPTF. And this is our 100th anniversary, and we do have an auction. And if you have a client that might have something Hollywoodish, you know, that might be iconic, by all means, let us talk to that person. And I would just like to say thank you for all that you do for us and for being such an engaged professional network. And we need leaders and advocates like you to sustain the next 100 years of service. Also, November 11th is slated for the fourth quarter PAN Luncheon. And if you, like I said earlier before, if you have any ideas of a PAN Luncheon for 2022, by all means, send me an email with your ideas. Okay, thank you. Okay, bye-bye.